had been secretly married to my CEO husband for 6 years, yet he never allowed our son to call him Dad. After yet another incident where he missed our son's birthday because of his secretary, I finally brought out the divorce agreement and left with my son, never to return. The usually composed man lost control this time. He barged into my office, frantically asking about my whereabouts. But this time, both Tom and I wouldn't look back. Chapter 1 Manager Chan. I will be going overseas for further studies next month. This is my resignation letter. The manager looked at me in surprise. Why so suddenly? I took out the explanation I had already prepared. My child's father is in Australia. I plan to bring my child there for a family reunion. The manager nodded. That's understandable. It must be hard raising a child on your own here. We all thought you were a single mother. I smiled. I wasn't before, but I soon would be as I stepped outside. I ran into Andrew and Rose walking toward me. Andrew is my boss, my husband, and my child's father. 7 years ago, I was his personal secretary. After one drunken night, we had a child. This is our 6th year of secret marriage. And also, the 6th year he hasn't allowed our child to call him Dad. Andrew walked slowly, as though intentionally taking care of the woman by his side. Rose held a report in one hand, while she held the hem of Andrew's suit with the other, their sweetness almost painful to watch. As we passed each other, my heart skipped a beat. I couldn't help but call out Andrew. His footsteps paused, his expression cold. Assistant Lynn, the polite, distant address carried an unspoken warning, reminding me that we were merely superior and subordinate in the workplace. I understood his implied message and swallowed my emotions. Chairman Koo. Andrew gave a brief sound of acknowledgement, his steps never faltering, as if I were a stranger. I smiled bitterly, swallowing the resignation message I had intended to say. Anyway, he wouldn't care. The phone screen lit up and it was a message from my son sent via his smartwatch. Mom, will Dad come back to celebrate my birthday? I froze for a moment and instinctively turned around. I saw Andrew bending down, speaking to Rose. As someone passed by, he instinctively shielded Rose in his arms. His eyes filled with unmasked tenderness, suppressing the bitterness in my heart. I still send Andrew a message. It's our son's birthday today. Will you be free tonight? Across the hallway. I saw Andrew pick up his phone, glance at it for less than 3 seconds, and then put it down without a single change in his expression, watching the chat remain unanswered. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Oriana Lynn. When will you wake up? You should have known it was a heart that couldn't be warmed. So why bother expecting anything? I slipped the phone back into my pocket, took a deep breath and left. Andrew, soon you'll be free. After leaving the office, I went directly to pick up my son from kindergarten. When he saw me, his first words were, Mom, today is my birthday. His second sentence was, Mom, will Dad celebrate with me? On the busy street, my eyes instantly welled up. Your dad. Before I could finish, my phone rang. Andrew finally had time to reply. I'll be home. I'm free. A wave of surprise swept through me, and I almost eagerly nodded. Don't worry, Tom. Dad will come home. My son clapped his hands, excitedly jumping into my arms. After 6 years of marriage, this was the first time Andrew had agreed to spend our son's birthday with him. In the evening, I cooked a nice meal, and Tom finished his homework early. An hour passed. Then 2. Then 3. I sent several messages asking if he was coming, but as usual, there was no reply. Tom seemed to understand something. He looked at me carefully. Mom, is Dad just too busy? A sharp pain shot through my chest. I wanted to explain, but not a single word of explanation came out. In the end, all I could say was it's okay. Mom will always be here with you. Tom didn't ask any more questions, quietly picking up his birthday hat. Mom, will you put it on me? I nodded, about to do so when I accidentally glanced at Rose's updated post on social media. Today was great. I really enjoyed today. The picture showed a lavish meal at a high-end restaurant, though Rose didn't show her face. I noticed the wedding ring peeking out in the top right corner. It was the one Andrew and I had chosen when we got married. However, he always wore it on his left pinky finger because that represented being single. How ironic. The wedding ring that symbolized marriage was Andrew's symbol of being single. On our son's 6th birthday, He was having a candlelit dinner at a fancy restaurant with his mistress. All the bitterness melted into calm at that moment. I liked the post and put my phone down, turning to place the birthday hat on Tom's head. Tom. Happy birthday. Under the candlelight, Tom closed his eyes and clasped his hands together. My birthday wish is to always be with Mom. I picked up my phone and captured the moment. The thought of leaving had fully taken root in my heart at this moment, growing into a towering tree. All right, Mom promises you. That night, neither of us mentioned Andrew. It felt like this home had always been just the two of us after my son fell asleep. I took out the divorce application I had prepared earlier. The last trace of hesitation vanished from my heart. At 2 a.m., Andrew finally came home. When he saw the cake on the table, a flash of regret crossed his eyes. Sorry, I forgot. I found it amusing, as there were reminder notifications on my phone one after another. Could he really not see them? Or was it that the warmth of his love affair made him forget everything else? I flipped the divorce application to the last page and, trying to remain calm, handed it to him. Please sign this. Before I could finish, Andrew's phone rang. Rose's panicked voice came through. Chairman Koo, the power went out at my place. Could you come over to keep me company? I'm so scared. Andrew immediately stood up, anxiety flashing in his eyes. Wait for me. I'll be right there. He hung up the phone, didn't even glance at me, and signed the document without a second thought. I stepped aside, silently watching him leave. Andrew, you must remember this. This home is one you chose to abandon. The next day, I returned to the office to hand over my work. Andrew approached me first, handing me a beautifully wrapped gift box. It's Tom's birthday present. I forgot to give it to him yesterday. I was taken aback and opened the gift. It was a small dog toy. The thing my son feared the most was a dog. When he was 5, Andrew took him to an amusement park, but in the middle of the trip, Andrew ran into a friend and let go of Tom's hand. Tom got lost in the crowd. When they found him again, he was trembling on the side of the road, scared by a stray dog. Since then, dogs had been Tom's eternal nightmare, and the person who caused this had the nerve to give him a dog toy as a gift. I didn't know whether I was angrier or more disappointed. I casually put the box aside in a calm tone. I said thank you. Andrew looked at me strangely, then seemed to remember something and added, Rose's power went out and I'm planning to let her stay at our house. Don't go to work today. Pack up and take Tom somewhere to stay for 2 days. His casual words felt like a heavy blow to my heart. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you telling me to leave the house with Tom just for Rose? Andrew frowned. Don't say it so harshly. It's just temporary. We agreed on a secret marriage, and we need to avoid any suspicion in front of colleagues. I smiled bitterly, finding it all too ironic. Is this really just about colleagues? Is it just about avoiding suspicion? Or does he feel that Tom and I are an obstacle to his pursuit of love, something he wants to keep hidden, not wanting to see him anymore? I sat back at my desk and continued working. I understand. I'll pack and take Tom out of here. I won't disturb you. It didn't matter anymore, whether it was sooner or later. It didn't make a difference. Seeing how easily I agreed, Andrew seemed to freeze for a moment. He opened his mouth, his tone unexpectedly softening. I'll make it up to you. I didn't raise my head, only silently continuing my work. The harm had already been done, and no amount of compensation could cover it up. When I got home, I packed my things and left with my son. Just as I was about to leave, the door opened and I ran into Andrew, returning with someone. He was pushing Rose's luggage with one hand, looking every bit the devoted man as our eyes met. I clearly saw the brief flash of panic in his. Rose was surprised and asked, Assistant Lin, what are you doing here at Chairman Koo's house? Hearing this, I immediately pulled Tom behind me, shielding him from view. They're my relatives. They're temporarily staying here. I barely started to explain, but Andrew interrupted me, his grip on the luggage tightening. It wasn't the first time this had happened, but every time I heard it, my heart was pierced. Before I could speak, Tom spoke up first. Hello, Uncle. I turned around in disbelief and saw my son's red eyes. Mom, let's go. All the words caught in my throat at that moment. I forced a smile and whispered, Okay. As we passed by, Andrew grabbed my arm. He looked at me in disbelief. Tom, what did he call me? I smiled bitterly, finding it all too ironic. Isn't this what you've always wanted? Chairman Koo. For 6 years. Andrew had not only kept our marriage a secret, he had never once let our son call him Dad. The only difference now was, before, he forced our son to call him Uncle. Now, our son was the one who wanted to distance himself from him. Lowering my eyes, I tried to pull his hand off, but I couldn't move it. Andrew looked at me, his expression complicated. Wait for me a few days. I'll explain to Tom. I reminded him, Rose is waiting for you. Let go. Andrew seemed to finally realize. Reluctantly releasing his grip, I sneered and grabbed Tom's hand, preparing to leave. But Andrew suddenly called out to us. Wait. He ran back to the car and handed me a box of cake. Tom, happy birthday. Rose spoke at the perfect moment. This was the cake Chairman Koob bought for me, but it happens to be your son's birthday. Assistant Lin, I hope you don't mind. The cake in my hand suddenly felt as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. I was about to refuse. But then I saw the surprise in Tom's eyes. My heart softened and I hesitated. Tom didn't understand the adult conflict, his eyes full of expectation as he looked at Andrew. Can you eat it with me? Andrew hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Tom ran into the living room, cheering, urging me to open the cake. I patted his head and quickly cut the cake, but as soon as I tasted it, the smile on my face completely froze. Spit it out. You can't eat this. I almost panicked as I snatched the cake from my son's hands. My expression frantic. Andrew's face darkened immediately. Oriana, are you crazy? I lifted my head. My eyes reddened. Tom is allergic to mangoes. Didn't you know? His face immediately filled with panic. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Another apology. Since Tom was born, I had heard this word countless times. Tom finally realized what was happening and stared at Andrew, his eyes void of expectation. It's okay. They didn't know. It's normal. With those words, Tom buried his face in my chest and refused to look at Andrew again. Without hesitation, I stood up and walked out. Holding Tom, Tom seemed to sense what was coming. Waving his small hand, he said to his father, Goodbye, Uncle. Hearing Uncle again, I could still feel Andrew's apologetic, panicked gaze as we walked out of the villa, but this time both Tom and I felt no more disturbance. Leaving the house, I went straight to the office and quickly packed up my things. I had planned to say a proper goodbye, but now it didn't seem necessary. I placed the signed divorce agreement on the table, letting out a long sigh, taking my luggage. I left for the airport with Tom before getting on the plane. I asked Tom, Will you be angry that Mom is taking you away? Tom shook his head and pressed his face against mine. I only want Mom. Tears finally broke free, and all the pain turned into relief in that moment. I pulled out my phone and blocked all of Andrew's contacts. Andrew, we will never see each other again. The next day, Andrew arrived at the office on time. After everything that happened yesterday, he had been restless all night. He opened his email, and one approved message popped up. Resignation Application Chapter 2. Looking at the large words on the email, Andrew suddenly had a bad premonition just as he was about to open it. Rose walked in, swaying gracefully. Mr. Koo, here's the report from last time. Rose placed the file on the table and, as if familiar with the routine, walked over to Andrew's side, resting a hand on his shoulder in the past. This had been their unspoken flirtation. But now, Andrew suddenly felt uncomfortable. Sitting up straight, Andrew opened the file after reading just one page. His brows furrowed. The entire page was a mess, apart from the format. Nothing was right. Even the department name was misspelled. He slammed the file down onto the table. His voice cold as he asked, Who made this report? Do they have basic work skills? Call Manager Chan. How does the HR department hire people? Rose's face immediately turned pale. Mr. Koo, I made this. All of Andrew's anger fizzled out in an instant. He glanced at Rose, who seemed taken aback for the first time. He felt a sense of helplessness in his heart. Rose looked up at him, her eyes red and her voice weak. Mr. Koo, do you think I'm stupid? She wiped away a tear, exuding the persistence of a delicate flower. If you really think I'm not up to it, I'll leave. You can hire a smarter, more capable secretary. With that, she turned to leave. Andrew instinctively reached out to stop her, but when he met Rose's pitiful gaze, he froze. Oriana would never look at him like that. She was proud, no matter what happened. She always tried to solve things herself, unlike Rose. If only Oriana were still here. His hand, which had been holding Rose, slowly clenched. He was startled by his own thoughts. Almost in panic, he let go of Rose and rubbed his brow. Tired. Go out for now. Rose still wanted to say something. Mr. Coo out. Andrew's patience ran thin and his tone grew colder. Rose bit her lip, but in the end she reluctantly walked out after she left. Andrew returned to his desk, looking at the flawed report. Countless images flashed through his mind. 7 years ago, I was a fresh newbie, no work experience, no outstanding academic background. I didn't stand out among many excellent candidates, but I was the only one who made it through the internship period. At that time I had drive. I was willing to work hard. If I didn't know how to make a report, I would stubbornly ask the senior employees for help. If I didn't understand the work process, I would carry a notebook to jot down notes anytime, anywhere, no matter when. As long as he needed me, I would be there in the shortest time with the best solution. Even at business events, I could quickly memorize everyone's identity and characteristics. Back then I always said, Mr. Coo. Next time I'll do even better. If being a secretary was graded, I would undoubtedly get a perfect score. Andrew still remembered that when he brought Oriana around, everyone envied him for having a gold medal secretary. But sadly, it all came crashing down that night. After that wild, unplanned event, everything changed. Andrew still didn't understand why I had degraded myself, scheming to get into his bed. He only knew that when he woke up the next morning and saw Oriana lying beside him, all the admiration he had for her turned into hatred. The admiration he had once felt was replaced by disgust. Even though we had to marry because of the child, he couldn't get along with Oriana. He even deliberately found someone like Rose, the complete opposite of me, as a rebellion against married life. But now, thinking of Rose who had become increasingly unbearable, Andrew suddenly felt bored. The image of Oriana and our son leaving with such finality flashed before his eyes, and his heart raced. Maybe he should stop his childish behavior. Maybe, after all these years, I had changed. Maybe. Chapter 3, at 6 in the evening, Andrew attended a banquet hosted by a business partner, accompanied by Rose. It had been an entire day since he last saw me. And Andrew, holding his wine glass, found himself somewhat distracted. Had he gone too far this time? This thought suddenly flashed across his mind. Andrew pursed his lips and drank the wine in one gulp. He took out his phone, about to send me a message, but was interrupted by an approaching business partner, Mr. Coo, about the proposal last time. Andrew was stunned for a moment before immediately pushing other thoughts aside, shifting into work mode. Just as the conversation was becoming lively, a discordant voice suddenly cut through. Mr. Coo, this dessert is so delicious. Rose, holding a chocolate cupcake, looked at him with an innocent, naive expression. The conversation was interrupted and the mood in the room turned sour. Rose, however, failed to pick up on the awkward atmosphere. She smiled brightly and squeezed her way in front of Andrew, bringing the chocolate cupcake to his lips. Caught off guard, Andrew ended up with chocolate and cream smeared all over his face. Rose was startled and quickly reached out to wipe it off. Andrew, however, stepped back sharply, as if trying to avoid a dangerous animal. Enough! Rose stopped, her eyes immediately welling with tears. Mr. Coo, what's wrong? You weren't like this before. Andrew took a deep breath, ready to speak, but then noticed the awkward gazes of the business partners. Seeing him glance over, the others awkwardly forced a smile. Mr. Coo, you continue with your work. We can talk about the proposal next time. The others all agreed, nodding. Yes, you're busy. We'll talk next time. With that, they quickly excused themselves and left. Andrew had no reason to stop them, nor would it have been appropriate. What should have been a productive business negotiation had turned into a humiliating affair because of Rose. Andrew couldn't even begin to imagine how he would be seen in the industry after this. And indeed, that's how it went. After they left, they found a place to mock Andrew. Tisk. Do you think Mr. Coo has some special fetish? Margot, a man in his 50s, was the first to speak up. Another one clicked his tongue. Maybe younger people like that sort of thing. Marco shook his head, still unable to understand. Secretary Lin was so much better, smart, capable, and most importantly, she had some sense. I don't know why Secretary Lin just wouldn't leave Polaris. I've tried poaching her a few times privately, but no luck. They all laughed, but no one responded directly. In truth, Marco had also tried his own hand at poaching. On the other side, Andrew was staring at Rose, his chest rising and falling with anger. Rose, look at what you've done. Rose's eyes turned red, looking as if she had been deeply wronged. Mr. Ku, what did I do? I just wanted to share with you. Did I do something wrong? She grew more upset as she spoke, even starting to sob. The others were drawn by the commotion, casting curious and odd looks in their direction. Andrew, unable to do anything, bit his teeth and suppressed his fury. He couldn't express his anger in front of everyone, so he forced himself to swallow it. You're not at fault. It's my fault, he muttered. Andrew closed his eyes, gripping the wine glass so tightly it felt like it would break in his hand. Rose blinked, thinking that he wasn't angry anymore. She quickly wiped away her tears and, excited, rushed into his embrace. Mr. Ku, you're so kind. Andrew's gaze became distant. In his heart, he regretted countless times that, in his attempt to rebel, he had chosen such a foolish woman like Rose. Chapter 4. Worried that Rose might continue causing trouble due to her lack of awareness, Andrew refrained from joining any more conversations with others. Occasionally, someone would approach him to chat, but he only exchanged brief pleasantries. For the rest of the time, Andrew simply sat in a corner on the sofa, drinking glass after glass of wine. Finally, after enduring until the banquet ended, Andrew bade farewell to the host and left in a hurry. By the time he returned home, the alcohol had started to take effect. Leaning on his head, Andrew unsteadily pushed open the door. Oriana, pour me some water. There was a long silence in the room. Andrew looked up, and as he stared at the darkened hallway, it dawned on him. I had left with our son yesterday. Turning on the lights, Andrew headed to the kitchen. He pulled out a can of soda from the fridge, and as he closed the door, he noticed that the fridge door was covered in numerous stickers, both big and small. Most of them were cartoon characters that his son liked. Looking at these childish stickers, which he usually found overly immature, Andrew couldn't help but let out a small chuckle. For some reason, the image of Tom sneaking into the study flashed across his mind. He had a children's book in his hands and with careful steps, walked up to Andrew, asking, Dad, can you read with me? And what did Andrew say? He paused, his hands still holding the drink, his gaze turning distant. He had said, I'm busy. I don't have time. Suddenly, a wave of inexplicable frustration surged within him. He took out his phone and, despite himself, sent me a message. Send me your address. I'll come to pick you and Tom up tomorrow. After typing the message, he felt it wasn't quite right and revised his tone. Where are you and Tom staying these days? I'll come pick you both up tomorrow. Taking a deep breath, Andrew clicked send. But the very next moment, a glaring symbol appeared on his screen. You are not yet friends with this person. Please send a friend request. And once it's approved, you can start chatting. Damn. The can of soda was thrown to the floor. Andrew furrowed his brows, nearly panicking as he opened the workgroup chat. Nothing. Still nothing in the group with hundreds of people. Andrew scrolled through message after message, but there was no trace of my profile picture. Had I left the group? No, that couldn't be. Oriana hadn't quit her job, so there was no way she'd leave the workgroup. Andrew chuckled, but it was forced, hollow. Thinking of the resignation letter that he hadn't opened earlier that morning, the unease in his chest refused to subside. He hesitated for just a second before dialing the HR manager's number. Hello. On the other end of the line, there was a lot of background noise, as if a family was watching television through the speaker. Andrew could even hear a child's voice in the distance. Daddy, the cartoon is about to start. Manager Chan cleared his throat and, seemingly having found a quieter spot, continued, Hello, Mr. Ku. Is there something I can assist you with? The deep voice of the man startled Andrew, who had been lost in thought. No, nothing. I just wanted to ask you. Why couldn't I find Oriana in the workgroup chat? Manager Chan paused for a second before quickly answering. Assistant Lin resigned. When did this happen? Andrew nearly stumbled, his legs growing weak. Manager Chan quickly explained. Early the day before yesterday, Oriana submitted her resignation letter. She said her husband was stationed in Australia and she wanted to go reunite with her family and further her studies. Assistant Lin was firm in her decision, so I reported it through the proper channels and got approval. Didn't you know, Mr. Ku? As Andrew listened, his grip on the phone tightened and he almost couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. How could he not know that Oriana had a husband working in Australia? Just as he was about to lose his temper, the sound of a child's voice suddenly came through the phone. Daddy, why aren't you watching TV with me? Manager Chan's comforting voice followed. Almost done. Sweetheart, wait for Daddy to finish this call, okay? It seemed like it was an inherent trait in every adult the moment they spoke to a child. Their voice would soften immediately. Andrew stood there stunned. Listening to the voice on the phone, uncontrollably, his mind once again drifted to Tom. In truth, he had a complete family, but somehow it felt like he had lost it. Chapter 5. That night, Andrew sat on the kitchen floor, not moving, throughout the entire night. It was the first time he had ever been so helpless. In the past, no matter how late he came home, there would always be a light on for him. There would always be someone sitting on the sofa, quietly waiting for his return. But now, all that was gone. The grand villa was empty, with only him left, waiting alone for the dawn to break. The next day, Andrew didn't even change his clothes before heading straight to the office. He opened the door to his office, only to find that my workstation had already been tidied up. It was so neat. It was almost glaring on the desk. A thin file lay quietly. It looked like Pandora's box, just waiting for someone to open it, his hands trembling. He opened it, and a line of bold letters caught his eye. The couple's relationship has broken down due to personality differences, and reconciliation is no longer possible. After mutual consultation, both parties have agreed to divorce and reach the following agreement. Andrew, female. Oriana, so you really do intend to leave me? Andrew chuckled, though his eyes betrayed him, turning red when it wasn't appropriate. He had thought about leaving many times, but he never imagined that the person who would make that decision first would be me. He never imagined that. Without realizing it, the person who couldn't live without the other was actually him. Grabbing the divorce agreement, Andrew made a decisive turn and walked away. He was going to Australia. He was going to find me. He was going to get answers. After all, it was me who had initiated everything. Why should I leave without a single word? The more he thought about it, the faster Andrew's steps became. He walked out with a stern expression, but as he turned the corner, he accidentally bumped into a woman who was all perfume. Mr. Ku. Hey, where are you going? You didn't even send me home last night. I had to stay at a hotel for the night. I'm upset about that. Rose stood in front of Andrew, pouting and acting coy. Leave. Andrew wasn't in the mood to entertain the fake, delicate woman. He coldly responded. Rose was taken aback, then stomped her foot. Mr. Ku, what are you saying? If you keep this up, I'll get angry. Leave. Andrew repeated himself, his eyes as cold as ice, as though they could freeze her in place. Rose opened her mouth to say something else, but Andrew simply pushed her aside and walked past. As he walked, his phone rang. Hello. Help me check Oriana's current address and also book me a flight to Australia for today. Chapter 6. Australia. Today was Tom's first day of school. I woke up early to get his backpack ready, although we had only been in Australia for 2 days. I had actually been planning this for a long time, half a year ago. I reached out to a friend who was working in Australia. I asked him to help me find a suitable house and school in Australia, preparing for the divorce. At first I didn't plan to come this early, but I was just used to being well prepared in advance. Looking back, I was glad I had that habit, or I would have been completely clueless. And I also had to thank Andrew for still having some conscience left after our marriage. He had never been stingy with money after watching Tom get on the school bus. I adjusted my coat and turned back toward home. But suddenly, a familiar voice rang out. Oriana. I stiffly turned around, and sure enough, it was Andrew. He looked much more haggard than before. His clothes wrinkled, and his chin covered with stubble. Yet despite all that, he was still handsome. That was how I was once captivated. No one knew that I applied for the job at the company because of Andrew. He was my senior, 3 years older than me. A fleeting glance at the welcome party made me completely lose my heart. I didn't come from a prestigious family, nor did I have striking looks. The only thing I had was diligence and intelligence. So during my 4 years of university, I studied and worked tirelessly, taking exams and internships. Only then did I get the opportunity to interview at North Star, and only then did I have the right to stand proudly before Andrew and tell him my name. It took me 5 years to get close to Andrew, but in one night, all my hard work was thrown away. I forced a smile, trying to maintain the dignity of an adult. I opened the door, but I didn't turn around. "Come in and sit." Andrew's eyes lit up, and he quickly followed my footsteps. 2 sugars. No milk. I poured him a cup of coffee and set it in front of him, sitting down on another sofa. Andrew's voice was a little hoarse. "You still remember?" I smiled faintly, not responding. "Since you came to find me, you must have seen the divorce agreement, right? I don't want half of your assets. I just want custody of Tom." Andrew paused, then raised his head to look at me. "Oriana, I don't agree to the divorce." I nodded without saying anything, already anticipating this. "It's fine. I can wait. I'll even agree to separate for 3 years." Andrew slammed his cup down on the table with a heavy thud, the sound of it hitting the surface echoing in the room. "Oriana, do you really want to leave me that much? Don't forget. 6 years ago, it was you who climbed into my bed first." My heart throbbed with a dull pain. I looked at him in disbelief, finally understanding everything. "Hey, Andrew. So this is how you felt all these years? No wonder. No wonder after waking up that morning, your attitude changed. Originally, I thought you didn't appreciate what you had once you got it. But now I see. You've always thought this way." There was disappointment. But more than that, a sense of relief. I lowered my eyes, fiddling with the coffee cup in my hands, my voice soft. "Andrew, have you ever thought that I might be the victim here?" Andrew stared at me, stunned. "What?" I remembered that night. That night, Andrew was drunk, and I helped him to the reserved suite. After briefly helping him wash up, I placed a glass of warm water on the bedside table and prepared to leave. But suddenly, Andrew grabbed my hand and roughly pulled me onto the bed. That night, I struggled, screamed, but it was all in vain. I had secretly admired Andrew for 4 years, but I never imagined that one day this would be how it would begin. After it was over, I spent the entire night convincing myself. "It's fine. It's okay. You liked him, didn't you?" But I never expected that Andrew didn't remember a thing. Well, that's fine. I could keep convincing myself that it wasn't hurtful. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, only calm remained. Let the past be the past. "Andrew, please stop interfering with my life, all right?" Andrew opened his mouth, his thoughts a jumbled mess. "What did you mean by that just now?" "It's nothing. I have things to do. Please leave." Andrew left before he left. He said only one thing. "I don't agree to the divorce when I've thought things through. I'll come find you again." I didn't pay much attention to him, and I officially began my studies in Australia. Without work to distract me, I spent more time with Tom. He gradually forgot the unpleasant memories and made many local friends. During this time, I casually dated a few boyfriends, but I never thought about getting married. Andrew also visited Australia from time to time to see Tom. Perhaps he wanted to repair his father-son relationship. I asked Tom about it, and I didn't refuse his visits. After all, Tom was Andrew's child. Andrew might have remembered something during that time. For a while, he kept sending me money. He would occasionally visit Tom and look at me with a guilty expression. I ignored him. I took the money but didn't stop dating other people. He was nothing more than a small interlude in my life, and he would no longer affect me. So you see, the sun will rise again. Even without the sun, it will still get light.